The Rain People, Part 1. New York is a city that does not sleep, but it does forget. Its sleeplessness is an endless procession of footsteps on pavements, the mechanical heartbeats of traffic lights, the groans of bridges that hold aloft the weight of millions, and the perpetual chant of coins changing hands. Yet in its restless breath, memory evaporates quickly, like the steam that rises from the grates in winter and dissolves into the air, leaving no trace of its origin. Men are born here and they are buried here, and between the cry of the newborn and the silence of the grave, the city has already forgotten their names. Among these millions there walked a man whose name was Jan. He was not a man of fortune, nor of remarkable appearance. His clothes bore the neutral wear of years, his eyes the tired color of unremarkable skies, his hair the fading shade of one who has endured time without applause. He was neither loved nor hated, neither remembered nor missed, and the world, vast in its hurry, had little space to consider him at all. He rented a modest room on the edge of the East Village, where shadows of elevated trains passed like iron specters across his windows, and he worked quietly in the depths of the public library, binding volumes whose pages no one seemed eager to read. To be forgotten is not always to be dead, and to be invisible is not always to vanish. Jan was a living proof of this paradox. He moved through the city like a shadow, and though his feet touched the ground of New York, he might as well have walked in some other world. For years this condition persisted, monotonous, uneventful, a silence stretched thin across the days. But destiny, which lies in wait for all men, patient as the tide and ruthless as lightning, prepared for him a revelation. It began on an evening drowned in water. The heavens, those great and inscrutable witnesses of man's folly, had torn open their reservoirs, and the city below was baptized in torrents. The lamps along Broadway shivered in trembling pools. Neon letters bled their colors into the black mirrors of the streets. Taxis hissed through rivers of asphalt. Pedestrians bent beneath umbrellas that turned inside out like defeated soldiers, and all the cacophony of New York was softened, absorbed, and transfigured by the downpour into a single hymn of rain. Jan walked, as was his habit, from the library toward his lodging, his collar turned high against the storm, his thoughts sunk in the gray sea of solitude. The rain was no enemy to him. It was, in its persistence, a kind of companion, one that spoke not in words, but in a music that blurred the outlines of the world and allowed him to feel less distinct from it. It was then, in the shimmering curtain of water, that he saw her. At first, she seemed merely another pedestrian. A woman, slight of frame, pale against the night, holding above her head an umbrella torn by the wind. Yet something in her manner arrested him. She did not hurry, as all others did. She moved with a grace that was almost solemn, as though the storm itself had summoned her, and she was walking not through it, but with it, like a sister to the rain. Her face was turned slightly downward, but her eyes, dark and fathomless, seemed to see not the world, but some memory beyond it. John stopped. His breath caught in his chest. There was nothing extraordinary in the woman's features, and yet the sight of her pierced him with a recognition he could not name. He felt that she belonged to him, not in possession, but in destiny, as though the years of his solitude had been a prelude to this moment of encounter. He wished to follow her, to ask her name, to hear her voice. But before he could move, the storm betrayed him. The rain, which had fallen so relentlessly, faltered. The clouds broke, the torrent dwindled to droplets, and then ceased. Silence returned, pierced only by the impatient horns of traffic reclaiming the streets. And with that silence, she was gone. Gone utterly. Not hidden, not vanished around a corner, not absorbed into the crowd. She had ceased to exist as the rain ceased to fall. The street where she had walked was empty.
The puddle where her reflection had trembled showed only the shiver of lamplight. The air where she had stood was void, as though she had been no more substantial than a shadow cast upon mist. John trembled. He turned in circles, searching. Passers-by brushed him aside with the indifferent rudeness of the metropolis, their eyes dry and unknowing. He wanted to cry out, but what words could he form? That he had seen a woman who disappeared with the storm? The world would laugh, and the laughter would bury him deeper in his silence. Yet within him a question, vast and terrible, like a cathedral built in darkness. Who are those who appear only when it rains?
The Rain People, Part 2. Jan could not sleep that night. The echo of the woman's disappearance haunted him like a bell that refused to cease its tolling. He lay in his narrow bed, listening to the faint creaks of the building, to the distant murmur of traffic, and above all, to the silence, a silence more oppressive than noise, for within it the memory of her absence grew louder. Morning came, gray and sullen, yet without rain. The city bustled on, indifferent, and Jan walked among the multitude as though condemned to invisibility. All around him, men shouted for taxis, women hurried with coffees in hand, shopkeepers arranged their displays of fruit and bread. It was the choreography of New York's eternal performance, a dance of repetition, and Jan felt himself outside of it, an audience to a play he could not join. The face of the woman lingered in his mind. He knew, with the stubborn certainty of obsession, that he had not dreamed her. Days passed. Then at last the heavens broke again. Rain descended, first in shy droplets, then in torrents, washing the city in its relentless hymn. Jan hurried into the storm as one might hurry into the embrace of a long-lost friend. His heart beat violently. His eyes searched every corner, every shimmer, every figure blurred by water. And then he saw them. Not one, but many. A child, barefoot, holding a kite, sagging with wet paper, running in circles with laughter that was not laughter, but an echo of it, a sound hollow and distant, as though borrowed from memory. A soldier, his uniform stained by wars that belonged to another century, boots striking the pavement with weary pride, his gaze fixed on horizons no one else could see. An old man, stooped, clutching a cane that tapped like the ticking of a failing clock, his eyes watery with the sorrow of years uncounted. They were scattered along the avenue, moving among the unsuspecting crowd, yet unseen by them. The taxis drove past without slowing. Pedestrians brushed through them as though they were made of vapor, and the neon lights reflected across their transparent forms without resistance. To the world, they were nothing. To Jan, they were everything. His heart shook with revelation. The woman had not been alone. There existed an entire people, a hidden multitude that lived only in the rain. Jan followed them night after night. Whenever storms gathered above Manhattan, he was there, at Times Square, in alleys, by the river's edge. He watched their processions, silent yet solemn, like mourners at a funeral that never ended. Each figure bore an air of incompleteness, a book never finished, a word never spoken, a love never returned. They were not grotesque nor monstrous, rather they were unbearably human, so human that their very humanity seemed to exile them from the living. The question gnawed at him. What are they? Ghosts of the dead? Shadows of forgotten lives? Dreams fallen into reality? And why, above all, could he see them when others remained blind? One night the storm was fierce beyond measure. Thunder rolled like cannons, lightning painted the skyscrapers with silver fire, and rain poured as if the heavens themselves sought to drown the city. Jan, soaked to the bone, pursued the pale woman once more. She moved with the same solemn grace, her broken umbrella still clutched in hand, and led him into a narrow street near Broadway where neon bled into water. There, at last, she turned. Her face was luminous with sorrow, and her voice, when it came, was scarcely more than a breath carried on the rain. "We are the forgotten, Jan." The words struck him like a sentence pronounced from an invisible court. She continued, "We are those whom memory has abandoned. We are the names no longer spoken, the faces no longer recalled, the lives erased from every heart. The world has forsaken us, and yet the rain remembers. When the sky grieves, it lends us form for a little while. The downpour is our resurrection, brief and fragile. When the earth dries, so do we, vanishing into the abyss of neglect." Jan trembled. The storm wrapped them in a curtain of silver. He whispered, "Why me? Why do I see you when no one else does? Why am I chosen to witness?" The woman's lips curved, not with joy, but with the melancholy of truth. "Because, Jan," she said, "you too are forgotten." The syllables hung between them like thunder delayed. Jan staggered as though struck. Forgotten? He searched his memory. Who awaited him at home? Who spoke his name in tenderness? Who would notice if he vanished tomorrow? He saw nothing, no family, no lover, no friend. His life had been a corridor of shadows, unmarked by the candles of remembrance. In that revelation, his soul shook. He realized he was not merely witness to the rain people. He was kin to them. The gulf between him and the living had long ago been dug, and now, under the storm, the final bridge had crumbled. The woman extended her hand. Rain cascaded over her translucent skin, dripping through her fingers like tears of heaven. "Come," she murmured. "There is a city within the city, a New York that exists only in storms. There we walk, nameless yet together. There we remember one another, for the world remembers us no longer." Jan hesitated. Behind him, the ordinary city clamored, horns, shouts, lights, all blind to the miracle before him. Ahead of him stretched the procession of the forgotten, marching through alleys that seemed to fold into dimensions unseen. He lifted his hand, trembling, and placed it within hers. The rain closed around them like a gate. The Rain People, Part 3. They walked together through the drowning streets, Jan and the woman, hand in hand, as though bound by a covenant written not in ink, but in water. Around them, the other figures of the forgotten advanced in solemn silence, their forms wavering between substance and mist. The storm did not hinder them, rather it nourished them, lending them breath, shape, and endurance. For Jan, every drop was a benediction, and yet every drop was also a weight, pulling him further from the world he had known. They passed beneath the shadow of skyscrapers, where windows glowed with lives he no longer felt part of. Behind the glass, families gathered at tables, lovers embraced, children laughed at glowing screens. None of them could see the slow parade of shadows just outside, a multitude of exiles walking unseen in the very heart of their city. Jan felt a pang, half envy, half liberation. Envy for the warmth denied to him, liberation from the prison of indifference that had long bound him. At the mouth of an alley, the woman paused. "Here," she said, and there was both command and invitation in her voice. Jan followed as she led him into a space that seemed at once part of New York and yet removed from it. The walls shimmered with rain, not as brick nor stone, but as veils of flowing water, like the skin of a dream. Doors appeared where none had been, carved from mist and lightning. The city beyond twisted, folding upon itself until the geography of Manhattan dissolved into a labyrinth of storms. It was then that Jen understood. This was the second New York, a city that existed only in rain. The boulevards were reflections of the real ones, yet blurred, distorted, shimmering. Lampposts bent like reeds under invisible winds. Subway entrances yawned as caverns dripping with endless cascades. Billboards flickered not with advertisements, but with fragments of forgotten names, broken letters rearranging themselves like lost prayers. And its people, its people, thousands upon thousands, each face an echo of a life erased. John saw a teacher reciting lessons to students no longer there, a mother rocking an infant that had grown into dust, a musician playing a violin whose strings were spun from rainfall. They moved in silence, yet a silence charged with the resonance of all the words never spoken, all the confessions never made, all the loves never acknowledged. The woman turned to him. "This is our home. It has no maps, no borders, no memory except the one we grant each other. When the rain ceases, we vanish. But here, as long as the storm persists, we are." Jean felt the weight of revelation press upon his soul. He asked, "Do you suffer?" Her eyes were pools of sorrow. "We suffer in being forgotten. But here, among ourselves, we remember. That is our redemption." They walked further into the city of storms. Bridges arched not of stone, but of liquid light, carrying them above rivers that roared with tears of centuries. In the distance he saw towers that leaned like penitents, crowned with lightning instead of spires. The air trembled with voices, not spoken but felt, the murmurs of millions cast out from the annals of memory. John's steps grew heavy. A realization came upon him like the slow tightening of chains. If he remained, he would be one of them. He would lose the fragile tether that bound him to the waking city, the chance, however faint, of being remembered again. And yet, what did that city hold for him? Who among its teeming millions knew his name, his grief, his dreams? Was he not already invisible, already erased? The woman, perceiving his torment, spoke softly. "You may return, if you wish. The rain has granted you passage, but not yet imprisonment. You may wake tomorrow and dismiss all this as illusion, resume the life of a solitary man among the multitude. But know this. Every drop of rain will call you back, whispering our truth. You will never escape the knowledge of what you have seen." Jan stood at the crossroads of existence. On one side, the world of the living, blind and deaf to his being. On the other, the spectral city of the forgotten, where at least he would belong, though only in sorrow. He looked into her eyes. They were not beautiful by the standards of the world, nor young, nor radiant. They were simply true, mirrors of his own desolation, flames of a recognition he had sought all his life. And so, with a voice that trembled yet did not falter, he said, "Then let me remain. For what is life without remembrance? Better to walk with shadows who know my name, than with flesh who never cared to learn it."
At these words, the storm seemed to deepen, as though the heavens themselves bore witness to his vow. The woman clasped his hand more tightly. Around them, the multitude of the forgotten raised their heads. And though they did not cheer, cheering was for the living, something like acknowledgment passed through the crowd, an unspoken welcome into their fellowship. The rain poured on, endless and eternal. And Jan, once a solitary man among millions, became at last a man among the forgotten.
The Rain People, Part 4. There are cities within cities, and lives within lives. The world we see is but a fraction, a crust upon an ocean of unseen depths. Beneath every pavement stone lies a history erased. Beneath every name uttered lies 1,000 unspoken ones. Humanity is vast, and yet it is pitilessly narrow, for it remembers few and abandons many. Jan had become one of those whom the multitude abandons. And yet, in the rain, he discovered the paradox of existence, that oblivion itself could be a form of community. What the world discards, the storm gathers. What memory rejects, water embraces. Is it not thus with all creation? The river carries not only the swan's reflection, but also the drowned leaf, the shattered branch, the forgotten paper swept from a street corner. The ocean does not distinguish between a pearl and a stone. The heavens do not withhold their rain from the just or the unjust. And so the rain becomes the great equalizer, the final archive of all that has been despised, uncounted, unseen. Jan walked with the forgotten, and in their silence he heard more truth than in the loudest proclamations of power. A society proclaims greatness in marble statues, but the rain slowly dissolves marble until only dust remains. The forgotten, however, endure in each drop, reborn endlessly as the storm returns. And here lies the eternal irony. The living labor to be remembered, to carve their names into walls, to inscribe their deeds into books. Yet time, that merciless eraser, spares nothing. Empires fall, monuments crumble, the proud are reduced to ash. But a single tear shed in anonymity, a single soul overlooked, may echo forever in the rain. Jan's story is not singular. It is the story of countless multitudes. The worker who dies at his bench and is buried in debt. The child who perishes before a name is recorded. The wanderer whose body lies unclaimed beneath bridges. The lover whose devotion remains unknown. The prisoner whose silence rots in shadows. The city forgets them all, and the world continues. Yet in the storm they assemble, forming a multitude greater than armies, a congregation of the neglected, who together form a truth too immense to be denied. And so let us not ask whether Jan lived or died, whether he was consumed by water or walked again among the oblivious. That is of no consequence. What matters is this. In every storm, when the streets of New York or any city flood with torrents, when faceless silhouettes appear at the corner of the eye, we are reminded that memory is not only a gift, but also a debt. We owe remembrance not to the famous, who have monuments enough, but to the voiceless. We owe it to the multitude who vanish each day without epitaphs, whose names dissolve like chalk in the rain. For perhaps God Himself is nothing more than the infinite memory of all forgotten things. And if so, then the rain is His scripture, and every drop a verse. Thus ends the tale of Jan, who sought not glory, but remembrance, and found it where few dare to look,
in the city that exists only in rain.